Okay, well, welcome everyone to our session today, how to stay the course of the CMMC marathon. It's one of everybody's, if you're a CMMC provider, it's one of your favorite topics to try to figure out how exactly are we going to continue to do this and do it well, especially over time and with the changing landscape. So just for a little bit of housekeeping, I have my lovely assistant, Sarah, on the phone with us today, so that if you have any questions, you can let me know, and so make sure that to stop our presentation so that I can answer questions. Please post those in the Q&A as opposed to chat. It's hard to keep up when we have both chat and then also Q&A. So if you have a question, please post it in Q&A. If you want to just chat back and forth with each other, please use the chat. All right, let's go ahead and get started. So what are we going to cover today? Today, we're going to talk about how to build an effective and efficient CMMC offering. We're also going to talk about how to get linked in with some source authorities that you have the right information for when things change. Well, and also even frankly, if you aren't really sure about something, which happens frequently. You're also going to talk about how keeping yourself as an island in the CMMCC is going to cause your offering to completely drown and die, and how to leverage your unique knowledge to keep your clients sticky. So, first let's talk about who am I and why do I have any authority to talk about this whatsoever? Well, in case you don't know who I am, I'm Leia Shilobod. I'm the CEO of Intech Solutions. We're an MSP outside of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and we do specialize in helping companies to get compliant and stay compliant with CMMC. And we are also an MSP to many organizations throughout our region. I founded the company in 2006, be security focused. And so it was just an easy entree into compliance and compliance management, which, by the way, I love. So that's one of the reasons I decided to become a CCP and a CISM. And we also authored the CMMC documentation toolkit, as well as a couple of books and a movie, The Dark Web Uncovered. So before we hop into the core of the presentation today, it's important that we first have some disclaimers and warnings here. The first is that if you're managing a CMMC program for a client, you really need to assure that the plan that you have for implementation and management of the program is a proper, sound plan, and that you're actually managing it, and that you're not just selling something that you can't fulfill on, because you will have some kind of legally binding agreement about how you're engaged with your client. So the burden is certainly on you to assure that whatever it is that you are offering, you're actually going to deliver. And so it's going to be very important, we'll talk about this a bit later, that you have a good statement of work and that you have sound resources to make sure that you're giving the right guidance. Not only can this be an issue with liability for your firm, but it can also cost you a lot of money if you don't price it properly, because you don't understand what it was that you got involved with in the first place. So first, one of the questions that I get from a lot of providers, whether it's an MSP or an MSSP or just a consultant that wants to do CMMC consulting, they ask me, how do I do this CMMC thing for my clients? How do I do this? So the first thing to think about is first that CMMC is a program. Cybersecurity maturity model is a program that you're implementing. That means that it's not a project. So you have something that is a living, breathing organism that exists all the time. Although CMMC is not a project, so it's not like, oh, buy TCC High or get this server or this product. Certainly not a project. However, your program is probably going to contain a lot of projects. And that's typical for any kind of program that you implement, that there will be projects along the way that you will need to implement. Programs require continuous work. So there is no set and forget in a program. Programs also need to have accountability. So if you're going to build a CMMC program offering, you have to make sure that you're thinking about who is going to be accountable for which things in this program that I'm delivering. Also, programs require process, ownership, and documentation. And there's no end to a program. The end of a program is when you shut the whole freaking program down. There is never like that first, on the first slide where you saw, what is like how to get through the CMMC marathon. And then you have like the guy that's like, going across the finish line, like, shit, that will never be you, because the program never has an end. Do you have milestones? Can you have successes along the way? Absolutely. But the CMMC program never has an end. One of the interesting things to think about as far as implementing a program for your clients is that many of us that are serving organizations that need CMMC compliance are finding that like most of those organizations, many of them are in the manufacturing industry, because it makes sense that the DoD needs them to make things. And the interesting thing about many of these manufacturing clients is they're already used to programs. They are already implementing programs and perhaps ISO certifications for things such as quality, safety, environmental, food safety, et cetera. So they're used to the concept of programs already. And it's going to be really important that if you want to do this for your client, that you're speaking their same language. So you want to remember, if they're already implementing programs, what kind of programs they potentially have in place. How can you use that existing knowledge of implementing programs to talk about the implementation of CMMC, a cybersecurity program, and link that necessity to certain things that they already made commitments for, and it's going to really help that conversation. Some of the things to think about for how you do this CMMC thing for your clients. One of the things that's going to be very important for you to decide is whether you're going to be the MSP, the compliance consultant, or both, or maybe even like the MSSP if we want to throw another acronym in there. So if you're the MSP and that's all you want to do is I'm just going to be the MSP or the MSSP, then you need to make sure that there is someone else either internally with the client, so a compliance officer, or an external compliance consultant that will take that ownership of assuring that things get done in the CMMC program. If not, the finger is going to end up being pointed at you for the service, whether or not you're paying for it, whether or not it's in the scope of work. And what is the reason of that? It's because CMMC is a cybersecurity certification, right? So if you are providing anything along the ways of something that a client is thinking is cybersecurity, like being MSP services, security stack, help desk, infrastructure, or MSSP, where you're doing some more sophisticated security things, they're going to think that this falls on you. So it's really important to get that clarity up front and decide what, where you want to play in the space of your client. If you're just going to be the compliance consultant, you need to make sure that you've got an MSP on board who can actually meet the requirements of the program. Because if they can't, then you're going to end up being in an adversarial relationship with that provider. And potentially there's going to be a failure of the program because one of the vendors can't deliver. So that's something you have to consider strategically if you decide to just be a compliance consultant. And of course, if you decide to be both, then there's a lot there. So first of all, you have less finger pointing because they're coming to you for a variety of services and you get to capture all that revenue. It sounds good. The only problem there is that you need to make sure that you have access to the right resources, accountability, guidance to assure that you're providing the right information and the right guidance and to meet those internal controls for your clients, as well as assuring that where you are in scope for your clients, assessment that you are doing the right things. So let's quickly review. We talked about this before, but let's quickly read the 5-step process of a CMMC compliance program. This is a work for us, and I'm telling you, if you implement this way, that you can have a lot of success. So the first thing is to identify the key data, business processes, and technology. So the whole program is about protecting certain kinds of data, FCI and CUI. If you do not start by identifying that data first, and the way that it flows into the organization, the way that it is, where it's stored and how it's accessed internally, and the business processes surrounding that, how it outflows if it does, and the technology that's used to support this process. If you don't start there, you're doing your client a complete disservice, because you don't even know where to start with recommendations or even with your gap assessment. This is the very first thing you need to do before you engage your client, even in a assessment, right? So that's step 2. Oftentimes you have a client prospect that comes to you and they've done some kind of self-assessment of some sort. Perhaps it was totally, just internal, and they had no IT to help them. Maybe they had their IT provider that really didn't understand the controls help them. Perhaps they had like somebody from their MEP that came in and helped them do it. Regardless, you're going to have some information, whether it's in a spreadsheet or maybe if you're lucky, a GRC tool that's provided to you. You have to make sure that you validate that first. In my experience, we get POAMs that usually have an SPRS score at level 2, anywhere between minus 35 and 75. I know, God bless, if you think you come to me and you're at 75. Because I'm about to make your whole day suck by letting you know it's about minus 75, not plus 75. But there's the whole way about going about that, because that's typically what happens. After you have gone back through and you have a really good gap assessment, and now their POAM is somewhere between 100 and 300 different items, which is a proper POAM in most of these cases, then you can look at all of those things and you can see the project, right? So you can say, okay, so I can see all these things that we have to fix, and now let's create some discrete projects to close the POAM, because the only way that we're going to close that POAM is if each one of those items is linked somehow, some kind of a project, security, infrastructure, documentation, business process, some kind of a project. And then in our experience, we developed the CMMC documentation toolkit program, which was how we implement the CMMC program with our clients. And we've done this with amazing success. That's our next step on being able to make sure that we're implementing a proper program. So we have templates. We start with the IT policies first, after we've done, clearly we've done these, the data flow diagrams and things of that nature. So now we're ready to talk about the Bible for the organization and go through the IT security policies, and decisions that are made in there are going to drive information in the plans, like the information sensitivity and flow plan, the BCDR plan, IRP, risk management plan, training and awareness. And then after we have those IT security policies, we can start working on those plans, and then go ahead into the next phase, which is to manage the program. And in our experience, what has been the best catalyst to do that is to implement risk management plan and risk management meetings to get and stay compliant. So you might ask, what exactly does that look like? What am I talking about when I say implement the risk management plan and risk management meetings? We could talk about that. So we all know that risk assessment and security assessment is required for CMMC. So let's take let's go review what that's all about. We're talking about 2 practice areas and 7 practices in total. All of those are level 2. if you are on this call right now and you are an MSP, an MSSP, or you've done any kind of cybersecurity consulting at all, then you know that if you're working with another business, you need some kind of risk assessment cadence of some sort involved for any of your managed clients, because that's part of what we do. And we should also be offering at a minimum some kind of security assessment, all managed clients or even prospects. And that could be something that is simple security assessment that maybe you include, to a paid for security assessment that is, more complex and multi-layered. Many manufacturers already have that risk management programs of some kind. So oftentimes you're able to speak their language on those kinds of things and dovetail into some of their existing processes. And that can help you with better adoption of the program. And just a quick reminder that the system security plan is only for contractors who need level 2 and level 3 compliance. And the objectives that we want to meet with risk management, risk assessment, risk security assessment, put us in this idea of like how we're going to use this as a catalyst, as a mechanism for the implementation and the maintenance program. Assess risk, scan and remediate vulnerabilities, assure a satisfactory implementation of the controls, and maintain an SST. So I want you to think of that. Assessing risk, scanning and remediating for vulnerabilities, assuring satisfactory implementation of the controls, and maintaining an SST. So if you think about what that looks like in real life, you're assessing risk, you're meeting with the client on a regular basis, because if you're just assessing risk and you're not talking to your client about that risk or having a conversation about risk, then you're not really assessing risk. Scan and remediate vulnerabilities. So many of us in a cadence with our clients are doing some sort of scans. We're pulling security reports. We're analyzing the information data that we have access to in order to assess risk. We're also assuring the satisfactory implementation of controls. So if we have clients who don't require CMMC compliance, we still know that we have to have some kind of a standard, right? So whatever that internal standard is, we're still telling companies that, but you're outside of that standard, outside of this best practice. And although we don't maintain an SSP for our non-compliance clients, we do maintain good documentation, which we should be, about how they're securing the system. And of course, that means that there are requirements for documentation and regular activities. So knowing all of these things, what should we do in order to, get this compliance program up and running? Well, integrate it into existing MSP processes. So like reading out reports, checking life cycling, checking maintenance, bringing forward recommendations, really does sound an awful like a quarterly business review, or some of us call that technology business review. So if that's the case, we actually have a mechanism, we just change it. Make risk assessment, make that practice your mechanism for maintaining your CMMC program for your clients. So put your QBR process on steroids, have regular quarterly activities, things like risk to the organizational operations, security assessments, incident reports, training and awareness. All of these things that you need to make sure that you're looking at on a regular basis. And then also break down to specific quarterly activities, because going through the whole program every single quarter is going to be a heavy lift for your organization. And also some of those things aren't necessary for you to do every single quarter. Things like reviewing your process for audit logging and analysis. I'm not saying to only look at audit logging. I'm saying your process, you look at that once a year. Onboarding, transfer, and offboarding procedures, making sure they're up to date. You don't have to do that once a year. Making sure that we have proper CUI media control and marks, making sure the removable media list is correct, reviewing the change management process, assuring that your client is checking their publicly posted information. These kinds of things only have to happen once a year. So every quarter, you have different agendas where you are covering different things. 4 things every quarter that have to happen every quarter to realign the environment, and then other things each quarter that are specific to that quarter. And the cool thing is that you have to remember that your risk assessment list, this whole thing, the program is shared. The program cannot be abdicated to an external provider. It cannot be, period. There have been actually there's been talk through I know so many people in this ecosystem, and they are very smart. But I hear things like, is it okay to completely outsource this program to a VCISO or a VCISO? And the answer to that is no, for abdication. You cannot abdicate this program. This program ends up falling directly on people who have the contractual relationship, and that is not an outsourced provider, period. So while you are able to facilitate, while you are able to guide, the organization can never abdicate to you, period. So to help them recognize, because I'm telling you, they will want to abdicate. Why? Because it's another thing. And so you kind of want to just say, who can take this burden from me? So it really helps is when you recognize that in this process of the risk assessment list being shared, here are some things that they need to provide. And this will help keep them on track of the fact that they cannot just say, set it and forget it because I hired you. So you're going to find tasks that are completed by you and define tasks that are completed by the client. You send agendas for a specific quarterly meeting, right, where we have the core things we do plus the extra stuff 2 weeks in advance. And then send the client, you've already agreed upon, here's the task that you have to do to prepare for this meeting. There might be things like looking at visitor logs, might be things like, checking to make sure the removable media list is correct. There's things that like, physical security, personnel security that you just don't have access to because you're not in HR or physical security. And then in that meeting, that risk management meeting, basically what you're doing is reporting variances or concerns. And then those agendas, just write on the agenda all of the meeting notes. And that's your evidence that you had the meeting. And it's also helpful clients to remind them what you talked about, as well as what you decided, especially when there are things. I always say this probably every single time I talk about CMMC, and I really do mean it. Please don't try to be a CMMC consultant or even to manage this program without a DRC tool. Now, I know there are plenty of organizations out there that are doing it with spreadsheets, and God bless them. I love you all. I think you're freaking amazing. I tried it with spreadsheets. I literally did. And let me tell you, it was very hard to manage it with spreadsheets. And then when I recognized that when we were actually going to get assessed, they'd have to look at all this information and try to make heads or tails of my spreadsheet. I recognized that I really need something better that was going to be able to provide that evidence. So that's why I've settled on FutureFeed personally. I make $0 from this endorsement whenever I talk about FutureFeed. I just really love this tool because I've literally demoed dozens of DRCs. And I think this one was built for CMMC NIST 800-S171 from the ground up, and they did an excellent job with that. So some of the things that some people say to me when they say, okay, well, I'm going to be a CMMC consultant, but I'm getting a lot of pushback from my clients. And I'm like, well, what kind of pushback are we getting? Here's one. Does this happen to you? Oh, well, it's always changing. It's always changing. Actually, I was just at an event this past weekend, a training event with lots of IT providers, and this was like they were complaining, but we kind of took a step back because it's always changing. And I said, my gosh, are you kidding me? It's always changing. So this is the first thing that I thought about. Like, have you ever gotten pushback from your clients when you have to go and tell them better cybersecurity because whatever they're using is outdated or it's no longer effective? Has it ever happened to you? Yeah. Okay. So first of all, was that fun? No. So you probably got things like this, like, we have to update your endpoint protection. I don't understand. Why can we not do this? We've had semantic endpoint protection for 10 years. That's right. And if you never renew it and you never renew it and you never download updates, it still seems to protect you okay. Oh, why do we really need to upgrade from that? It seems like it's all right, right? Uh-huh. Yeah. Or like the firewalls. You mean those become ineffective? How? How do those cost $2,000 on this firewall 5 years ago? What do you mean it's not an effective tool against cybersecurity now? SIM and SOAR, like what is that? Are we flying? Like what are all these new acronyms that we have to learn about? So they're getting confused and frustrated here because what they're not understanding is that when we're talking about cybersecurity, it's always going to be changing. And it's not that you look at a cyber security program. Do you want that? I want it to not change because the threats are always changing. And the technology that we can use to address those threats and is changing. So I want the program to change over time because the threats changing and the possibilities of what we can do are also going to change. And just in case you don't believe me, and back in September, I got to hang out with Stacy Bostjanick, who is the one at the Department of Defense's CIO office, DoD CIO, and she's in charge of the CMMC program for that office. And I was talking to her about the fact that people keep saying, well, I don't know if we should really do this. It's always changing. It's really going to be a thing. And this is what she said, quote, the cybersecurity requirements from DoD will never stay static. Security for the nation has to evolve. So like that's coming from the mouth of DoD. That's who's pushing this program. So let's stop pretending like it's not going to change. It's going to keep changing. I also hear this on occasion. This really isn't going to get off because they see like the changes, right? They see like, oh, it's never going to happen. CMMC is never going to happen. But you know what? You're right. There currently is no CMMC program. And Stacy was clear to say that from the stage when I was talking to her in September. There is no CMMC program. Right now, the current requirements are in DFARS and CFR. But the but here is that most of the people that we're working with already are not meeting these current requirements with DFARS and CFR. How do we know that? We know that because A, we're working with them. We know that. And then B, because DoD is telling us over and over and over again that, well, you were supposed to be doing this anyway, which wins lots of votes and love from the DIB. If you didn't hear the sarcasm in my voice, I don't know what to do about that besides note that was sarcastic. So recognizing that this is what you are supposed to be already doing, you need to make sure that you've brushed up on DFARS and CFR and you have some idea about what it is, like where did it all come from? Also, remember that the rulemaking process is long and that this is normal. So there is such a huge focus on the rulemaking process here because it has such a huge impact on the DIB contractors with accountability to the level that many of the other rules did not. And that's one of the reasons why there is such a huge focus on this particular rulemaking process. And when people are seeing it, what feels like take a long time or get deferred, that makes them feel like, oh, this is never going to happen. But the fact of the matter is that most of this is normal. And where we have some delays, it's actually not a bad thing because they are thinking about certain things that that you and I probably have some concerns about anyway. I also hear well, CMMC, they just can't get their shit together. So like, it's just like not going to happen because they can't get the whole freaking program together. So what I want to remind you all of is that this is a new cybersecurity program, and anything that's new, it's going to take a while. And it's also going to have some changes associated with it. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. There have been tons of working groups. It seems like, though, there's not as many voices who are implementing programs like you and me, or from the small manufacturer, who is really going to bear the brunt of this because of the cost to implement good cybersecurity. Also remember that when they were building this program, they're working from, like, especially at level 2, working from a lot of the NIST 100-171 controls, which frankly were aged. I mean, we all heard that we have a new rev that's going to be coming out soon. That's great. But we're working with controls that are pretty aged. And in cybersecurity, our tools, the TTPs, procedures, yep, the TTPs, and the technology that we have to address these things changes in an exponential rate. So that's also been another reason why sometimes it feels like they can't get their shit together. And there definitely is a disconnect. Like, I'm going to say that there is a disconnect between government and industry and what's feasible for implementation. Absolutely. But the bottom line is that the program won't fail. It doesn't matter how painful it is, how many revisions we have to get, it's not going to fail. So we have to get ready now. Oh, I love this. So I was telling Stacy this when I was chatting with her back in September, and I was saying, oh, so, whether it's providers or whether it's like, my OSCs, they're like, oh, they can't get their shit together. This isn't really going to happen. And she's like, oh no, we're passing the final rule in March. No doubt about that. So I was like, can I quote you, please? So that's what she said. So what are you going to do now that you decided that this is what you want to be able to do, is to provide a CMMC consulting program, be an MSP or an MSP in this space? Well, you got to stay in the know. How do you do that? Well, the first thing I want to tell you is that you do not buy into the FUD online: fear, uncertainty, and doubt. And for God's sake, do not be a source of FUD for 2 reasons. First, because you do a disservice to the entire ecosystem, to security, to the small businesses. You do such a disservice, and in a minute, I will show you how you are such a disservice to small business. But also, you're going to end up on the bag egg channel on the CUI Discord server. Not a good place to be. Those people are savage, so just don't do FUD. So if you see people talking about seeming insurmountable changes or challenges, take those with a grain of salt. And one of my examples is, we have a CAP, the CMMC assessment process right now that seems like it needs to be edited and rewritten so that we have scoping things in the scoping guide instead of in the CAP. And also that we have clarity on things such as what a CSP is and what an MSP actually does. While those things seem like a lot of people are getting very upset and there's lots of, back and forth, the bottom line is that this is a stat that Stacy said. 40% of small businesses have dropped their contracts since the requirements were originally announced. 40% of small business, which is important to the government, if they have small business involved in this, they've already dropped out because of these requirements. And these programs have to be implementable for 200,000 small DoD contractors. Understanding that, then you have to recognize that there will be some changes. They will be. I don't know what they look like. But if you have all of these organizations drop out of the supply chain, there will not be a supply chain, and our country will not be able to support the warfighter. So remember that. Don't make assumptions. Suspend your judgment and take information in. Okay, that's what I'm saying to do, and don't freak out. And it doesn't help. Stops your brain from functioning properly. And then make sure that you're using source documents and source authorities only. Definitely listen to the voices. Just remember where they are coming from. Okay. So here are some other things that I highly recommend so that you can continue to stay in the know. If you're on this call, then you're some kind of a CMMC provider or you intend to be a CMMC provider. Take a CCP course. It's the very best source of learning for those who are serious about doing CMMC work. Even the provisional assessors who have taken this course are like, yes, right? Because most of them were not like trained very, very well. And this has been like a really great thing, even for provisional assessors, take a CCP course. Make sure that you're using a licensed training provider, an LCP, to look for that designation, because you want to assure that you have good quality education, especially when it comes to compliance. I personally use Edwards Performance Solutions. For my CCP, you can use any LCP, but I loved working with them. They've had great trainers, and they're not only engaging, but highly knowledgeable. Also, Edwards wrote the curriculum, so that gave me a very high confidence level in the information that I was being as well. It also gives you that opportunity to network with the students and with the instructors. And I'm telling you, there were like some really freaking smart people on these calls that I now get to call my friends. And we're constantly talking about one of my favorite topics, CMMC. So spreading the love around. I also recommend that you go to a CMMC conference out behind your desk and stop posting on LinkedIn and get in front of people and talk in real life. It's a total game changer because you get to have different kinds of conversations and link with people in a different kind of way. So here's a couple of things to think about. There is a CMMC Day on May 15th, cmmcday.org that you can consider. And then also the CMMC Information Institute, CIC 2023, is having a conference in January in San Diego. Please sign up for this conference. This is going to be a workshopy kind of conference. It's going to not just feel like people who are like, I'm way smarter than you, and this is how much more I know about CMMC. This is legit like how to be a provider to implement, or if you're internal in a company, and that's what you're supposed to do is implement this program, is telling you those kinds of things. It's going to be a bang up conference. In fact, how about this, guys? We're actually going to be doing a pre-day for CMMC providers, where we're going to teach you more about implementing a CMMC program, kind of getting more workshopy into it. And anyone that attends our pre-day also gets discounts to the conference. Don't worry, I'm going to send information to all you guys because you were here, but make sure you block that in your calendar. Also, San Diego is beautiful in January. And if you're like me from Pennsylvania or somewhere here, it's colder. January. Also, make sure that you're linking with sources. So here's some sources that you have to make sure that you are kind of like in the know with. So the Office of the DoD CIO, that's the office in charge of the CMMC program. Stacy Bostjanick, who I've already mentioned before, you want to follow her. And then also I tend to follow the Defense Contract Management Agency, John Ellis there, who I got to meet back in September as well. He's the director of DIBCAS, that's Defense Industrial Based Cybersecurity Assessment Center. So I like to kind of keep pulse with him and what they're doing at DCMA for a couple of reasons. The first is because it's possible that that one of your DIB organizations could just have a surprise DIBCAC assessment. That has been happening, where if it's an important program that you get a call from John Ellis's office, hi, we're coming in to do this assessment. So it's not a CMMC assessment, it's a DIBCAC assessment, which is different. And then, a week later, 2 weeks later, however, whenever they're going to get there, they come in and you have to be completely ready and they're checking the status of your program. So I like to keep track with him to see what they're doing there and how they're doing it. It seems like some of the practices from the CAP are being taken from DibCAC, some of them not. But anyway, it's a really good source of information. Also, so being that I just talked about DoD CIO and DCMA, I wanted to just take a moment when those of us think like, wow, there's so much here in, in this program and, all of these changes and all of this. So we're talking about the government, and I'm telling you guys, I've always been in private industry. So it really blows my mind, the amount of government that we have involved. This is DoD CIO. These are just like some of the important people in DoD CIO. It's a lot of people, right? And then we've got, let's see, this is a little bit about Stacy, so you understand how she's in charge of the defense industrial base stuff with CMMC. But like here's the DCMA, Defense Contract Management Agency. And I'm thinking to myself, like, those are my tax dollars at work. Holy shit, excuse my language. So many freaking like agencies and people, and why can we not get this off the ground? Because there are too many agencies and people. So you got to pay attention to them right now, because you can't just fight the power. We have to just try to make sure that we are making our clients compliant and they can get their contract. Here's a list of some influencers who are plugged into the system that I highly recommend you follow on LinkedIn. All of these people are my personal friends, and they're amazing and they're very, very smart. Some of them, they just have really great information and insight. So don't look at these people as being sourced. In other words, like they're not from, the Cyber AB, they're not from DoD CIO, but these are assessors, these are CCPs, these are, like Allison Giddens, who's a good friend of mine. She is such a strong voice for small manufacturers who are going through this right now. And she's very opinionated, and I love the hell out of this woman. You want to hear some like good, like, especially if you're trying to market the service and you want to hear some pain points, follow Allison, because she'll tell you those pain points. It's fantastic. Also get plugged in. So join the CUI Discord server. I don't know if you can just join, or if you need a friend to refer you. If you need a friend to refer you, you can use me. But they're like a great place to get lots of information and collaborate and post questions, or just, kind of network with your colleagues. And I mentioned source documents. So what source documents was I mentioning? All of them. Like RTFM, guys, read the fucking manual. Here is just a short list of some of the documents that you really need to read and be familiar with if you're going to do this kind of work. Yes, take the time to do it. By the way, I wasn't just being, brash on that. So RTFM was Mark Cuban's way that he ended up, rising up from nothing to selling copiers. He's like RTFM was what he decided to do, and that's how he was successful. So if it worked for Mark Cuban, it's going to work for you and me. Finally, make sure that you're not an island, because you're going to drown. There are so many changes and so many different perspectives, and you're assaulted with these things nearly daily, especially if you're on LinkedIn or the CUI Discord server. It's way too easy to overthink these things, and it's way too easy to miss something. There's so much information, and there's absolutely no way that you can know everything about all of it and the specific applications to all the unique environments that you see. There's just no way to do that. So you need a good and strong network. So make sure that you have smart people, because smart people get better together. So join a community or a peer group. So I wanted to bring together all those smart people and key subject matter experts. So we created a peer implementation and coaching program to augment our CMMC IT documentation toolkit that has policies, plans, procedures, all that, those kind of templates. It helps everyone to get clarity on the controls, what they look like in real life, accountability to actually implement, because sometimes people are like, well, I want to do this, but then they're like, don't actually like kind of say it to launch. Like there's so much to do. I'm afraid to get started. So make sure we have accountability for that. We've got a great mind share of really smart people. It makes us all better. And then we have really smart SMEs that join our calls from time to time for knowledge transfer, perspective. And, you know, quite frankly, we've had fun sometimes telling some cyber stack providers, like security stack providers, what they need to do differently. It's fun. And they listen because they want to stay in this game. And then be able to talk to some provisional assessors about some of these things. It's not only fun, but it's so insightful. And we get to share wins and the business that we've closed and the organizations that we help. So I will teach you if you're interested. Like I've been doing these how-to videos because I really want to make sure that people have good information. And when you go out there into the world, that you're putting together a good program. But I actually will help to teach you to implement and maintain your CMMC provider program if that's what you want. Because the fact of the matter is that compliance is coming. It's not just CMMC, it's coming in every industry. So once you learn how to implement and maintain compliance programs, you can do that for anyone, even if it's not CMMC. Doing this work positions you so well, especially to get us through this recession. In our program, you get access to the IT documentation toolkit, peer coaching, and you understand the what and the how. And we are just about to start a 7-week fast track program. So we'll get you oriented to all of our content, how to implement, how to maintain, how to price, package, sell, and market. So what are you going to do now? So what I think you should do is join an amazing mastermind peer group to learn how to build and implement your CMMC program. So you can get insight into pricing, packaging for profitability. I mean, 2023 is going to be a fantastic year if you're positioned properly. If you are not positioned properly for cybersecurity and compliance going into 2023, you're going to be like most organizations that are projected to contract during the recession instead. Do not be one of them. You also get access to the templates to build the required documentation, and the fast track program gets you sell ready with confidence. So if that's interesting to you, please hop on our next session next week, the Shortcut to Big Profits and CMMC Compliance. So we're going to talk about how to systematically build a program, make some money in this, because I know we do this because we're mission driven, but we can't do it for free. There has to be a cost for what we do because we work really freaking hard to make sure that we do the very best work and keep these organizations secure. So we're going to talk about not only how to do that, but also I'll tell you about our special offering to get access to the toolkit templates, as well as the 7-week fast track program and the peer coaching and implementation so that you can kick off 2023 strong and profitably. All right. Do you have any questions at all? I have one here, which is, what is the offer for the toolkit, the fast track? Okay, so we're going to go over that next week. So make sure that you join the call next Wednesday, where we'll go through all those kinds of things. If you have specific questions, you can certainly reach out to me ahead of time by just getting me an email. All right. Well, thank you all for joining today. And I will see you all next week. We're going to talk about how we're going to make a lot more money, as well as really secure the defense industrial base and have fun while doing it. Happy Thanksgiving, everyone.